to think of Barry Fitzgerald in is The Quiet Man, the John Ford film. Mr. Fitzgerald died where he was born, in Dublin, which I think he loved that city very much, from what I was able to sum up from what I read about Mr. Fitzgerald.
Yeah, he and his brother, Arthur Shields, who we know from some movies, agreed in the Valley. He played the censorious minister casting out the pregnant girl, for example. Were founding members of the Abbey Theatre in Dublin. Arthur Shields, more than Fitzgerald, who did more film work than Shields, although he did film work, also tended to do more theatrical work. Barry Fitzgerald also was a homicide detective in a film noir a couple of years after this called Union Station, with William Holden and Nancy Olson and Lyle Petker, which is, I think, a stunning movie. I recommend it to everybody. And he's very understated in some ways in this film. I was happy to hear a lot of laughter, because I saw this on my own at home, making notes, pausing, etc. And it's very different seeing it with an audience, because he does have a lot of witticisms, but he doesn't overdo it, and sometimes he could. So it's nice to see him toning it down some.
Fitzgerald did die in Dublin in 1961, and he was 72. A heart attack victim again. Jana, you watched this for the first time. Mm-hmm. The movie is 70 years old. There's a lot to be said for the fact that it was popular in 1948. It spawned two television shows, two different casts. It's the same show. It was called the Naked City on television, but it has kind of a involved history being presented on TV during the years 1958 through 1963. I mean, as you indicated, there was a police procedural which probably was copied quite substantially during the past 70 years. But watching it for the first time, did you feel that this was really very cliched and that it didn't hold your attention during the course of it?
No, I mean, it definitely held my attention. That's where the storytelling came in. I think you wanted to know who done it, how they were connected. You know, what's the significance of the thefts? What is, who is Henderson? Or, you were. I think it definitely keeps your attention. The things that I was noticing now is I was on the set of the film that I wrote. And the things that I was noticing were the camera movements. There was a lot of shots where there were two of them or three of them in the same shot, and that's something that used to be done, and it's not really done that much anymore. That's sort of old-fashioned filmmaking where the camera didn't move very much. Every so often I noticed it moving. So those were the things. I was sort of focused on that and the fact that what did you say, 107 locations? So I didn't know that number, but just shooting on location is really difficult because you have to deal with the elements. There's a lot of things that are out of your control. Sound, someone moving in the background. So the fact that they achieved this in 1948 was really impressive, and I was impressed with the filmmaking more than anything. Like just the art of it at that point. So.
There's one classic film technique that's used very effectively in this movie, I would say, and that's montage, which is a succession of often one-shot scenes that relate to a common theme or image. We see at the beginning with the woman washing the floor, and the guy setting type, and then the disc jockey. But it's beautifully done with that. Have you seen a man who looks like this? And we see that being asked at a box office outside the movie theater, and then Chinese laundry. And then wonderfully, it carries over to the next day. I thought that was my favorite moment in the movie. When we start a new day, and we're still doing, ever seen a man looks like this? That's a wonderful example of montage in this film.
In order to get this filmed in New York City with all these people that were just part of the everyday comings and goings, the filmmakers had to resort to what I refer to as kind of guerrilla filmmaking. They would establish like phony newsstands that had some sort of a construction that could hide a camera so that they could indeed photograph something that was going on nearby and not draw a crowd of people that said, oh, look, a camera, what are they doing? That's what they didn't want. They didn't want people stumbling into the thing and ruining the shots that they wanted to capture. They would distract sometimes crowds by having a man climb up one of the light posts and give an oratory, very loud, very boisterous, and everybody was attracted to that, so they could do something that they wanted to do without the interruption of the parade that was normally going by. Pretty ingenious, and it's something that probably inspired a lot of other people who were to do location shooting subsequently.
I was telling Barry a story yesterday, I think I was talking to you yesterday, and on our film we had a donkey who was not supposed to be in any of the shots, and pretty much on the hour he would make his noise, you know, he would hee-haw, make all these noises, and we would have to stop everything. So this donkey, so I can't even imagine all the elements that you would have to, contend with in the middle of a big city like New York. So it's a pretty impressive, I think, achievement for that.
I was really struck this time watching it. Ted Corsia, it's not the best way to try to get away from the cops. Climb the top of a bridge, I don't know what you're going to do once you get there, except fall. But the way he staggers up there, an arm draped over the railing, he's not hardly holding on to anything. Then I thought, there's a photographer up there too.
I thought the same thing. Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a very impressive climax that takes place at the Williamsburg Bridge. Just to see this man who has, made the ultimate mistake. It's a typical mistake that happens in a horror movie. You're trying to get away from the monster, and you usually put yourself into more jeopardy than you would have if you confronted the monster. But here he is up at the height of this bridge, and what's going on in the background and also on the ground. If you notice, there was one scene where he's peering over the bar that's preventing him from falling off. And there's tennis matches going on, oblivious to what is taking place on the bridge at his level and on the surface of the bridge itself. Pretty incredible.
Do you know anything about how many takes it took to get that climbing shot?
I have no idea.
Because that would be interesting to know. Because
No.
I can't imagine they did it that many times. And it was really well done.
Yes. Speaking of that man who was the villain, Ted Corsia, as I said earlier, he had established himself as a villain, and if you want to see more of this guy, he was in films for about 25 years, and maybe these films you've already seen, and if I tell you the character that he played, it might jog your memory. In a movie called Crime Wave in 1954, which was a kind of a neat little noir that was directed by Andre de Toth. He played a character by the name of Doc Penny. More often than not, de Corsia his character had a first name which was somewhat of a reflection as to what his profession was in the movie, and or perhaps his heritage, what nationality he was. In a movie called Man with a Gun with Robert Mitchum in 1955, Ted de Corsia is Frenchy Lescaut, the owner of a not too terribly honest saloon in a community that Robert Mitchum has been sent to clean up. And then in probably a more recognizable film, Gunfight at the OK Corral, with Kirk Douglas and Burt Lancaster, you will find Mr. de Corsia playing Shanghai Pierce. I would assume that had something to do with just how he created his gang that was causing a lot of commotion there in a part of that production of that famous Wyatt Earp story.
I think my favorite Corsia film is probably The Enforcer, which is a couple of years after this Humphrey Bogart crime film. He's very, very good in that. And also, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. He was on...
No, he's in a lot of films.
Captain, yeah, he was there.
Speak quickly about Don Taylor, who plays the young detective who's definitely learning the ropes here, and seems to be catching on rather nicely after a fashion. Taylor, before his co-starring role in this particular movie, was a supporting player in films. And really, he never gravitated to much more than that, and was not in anything that was kind of knock your socks off. I don't believe he ever got an Oscar nomination. But he did gravitate very nicely into being a director. And he has 95 directing credits on the IMDb in a 20-year period, mostly TV movies and series episodes. Occasionally, the feature film maybe rose just a little bit from the C+ to B- category. Two titles that I wrote down here. He directed Escape from the Planet of the Apes, and a movie called The Final Countdown, which had quite a definite sci-fi twist to it.
He also directed, second time around, his Island of Lost Souls, the first one, and then Marlon Brando was in the atrocious version, The Island of Dr. Moreau, and Taylor directed the good one with Burt Lancaster in the late 70s. As an actor, probably his best known role would be Elizabeth Taylor's fiance in Father of the Bride, with Spencer Tracy and Joe Bennett.
Howard Duff had a 40-year acting career beginning in 1945 on a radio program playing Dashiell Hammett's charismatic private eye Sam Spade. That success, which extended for almost a 5-year period on a weekly basis. Here he was playing Sam Spade on the radio. I assume it was a half-hour program. But that success led to a small role in Brute Force, and definitely brought him to the attention of Dassin, Hellinger. So all of a sudden, here he is in what was a much more substantial part than in Brute Force. Good-looking guy who kind of traded on that fact in films. Not really the greatest actor in the world, but he did get a contract with Universal, and if you check out what he was in for the next 2 or 3 years, it was almost without exception Universal B product, sometimes shot in color by Technicolor. Probably a very fortuitous moment in Duff's life was when he met Ida Lupino in one of those movies that was done at Universal. Yep, That led to a 15-year marriage and joint film and television projects. Bob Pingree will tell you about one or two that he finds are probably pretty good examples of film noir.
That movie by Lupino was called Private Hell 36, which is not a title that necessarily gets, I'm sure, a lot of dashing off to the video store. I love it. Don Siegel directed one of his first films, the man who was greatly responsible for promoting Clint Eastwood's career, directed him 5 or 6 times, I think. And this is a smashing film noir. It's got a great scene where a guy is fleeing and his car rolls down an embankment and he's got a chest full of money in it or something, and it flies open when it hits the ground. And these 2 honest cops are on the scene. And they're standing there, and a breeze comes up and just blows the money toward them. And it's like, ooh, take this, take this. Private Hell 36, a wonderful film. While the City Sleeps is a later one, I think not as interesting. And he wound up actually playing, I think, one of the divorce attorneys in Kramer versus Kramer.
Yes.
Right.
You know,
Yes. I had a long career.
yeah, really.
Is there something that you would perhaps like to ask us about? Not that we're going to be able to answer it, but we'll give it a shot. Any questions from any of you? Did you enjoy this? Was this good?
John Randolph. You mentioned that he was in the movie, the actor, John Randolph.
Yeah, I think I'm forgetting exactly. Was he one of the dispatchers? I'm forgetting. It's so fleeting, but he's. If you look up the entire cast, probably about 75% of it is uncredited as far as the film itself is concerned. It's populated. There's an actress by the name of Molly Picon. She played the lady who was in the little shop there that gave Taylor a root beer, if I remember correctly. It's just chock-a-block full of Paul Ford, the guy who became incredibly popular character actor in the 1960s. Bilko, it was on with Phil Silvers. Always frustrated. His frustration here is not on display too much, but here he is as a detective. Arthur O'Connell shows up as one of the police officers.
He's actually got a fair number of lines too.
Yep.
He's Sergeant Schaefer in the apartment at the beginning, who first gives a report to Dan Muldoon there. He's got 5 or 6 lines. And I didn't recognize him the first time I watched it, but then I looked at the cast and I said, Arthur O'Connell, he's the 2-time Oscar nominee. Where was he? And then immediately noticed, but he's in profile most of the time, so you don't get to look at his face head on.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
just want to understand, in terms of filming it, the